Dr. Shannon Parker is a sleep expert. She runs Sleep Lab New Zealand, she's been a sleep researcher, and she's helped some of our national teams and our biggest club teams and the athletes in those teams to really help themselves be better through sleep, maximising their athletic potential. We wanted to get Shannon on because if you're anything like us and our kids, you have moments or lengthy periods where you really struggle with your sleep. It's one of those two pillars, I guess, to really becoming your best self as an athlete. And we always think about playing the long game with sleep and nutrition, because in that long game, you need to expend more effort, do more trainings, put in extra work than other athletes to become the best. But how does that work? How do we energize ourselves through better sleep? And so we had a great chat with Shannon, and we pulled apart a number of things. We talked about what it does to the body and mind when we have good sleep versus bad sleep. We looked at some of the challenges that are out there in the world at the moment and those disruptors of sleep. We looked at how she designs environments to really help athletes thrive. We talked about the amount of sleep, and this was an interesting one to me, having kids going through puberty, kids who have been early risers who suddenly want to sleep in really late, and that question of, should I be letting them sleep till midday, or should I be waking them up at a certain stage? We talked about my personal favourite, which is the good old nap, and whether these are a positive thing for our athletes, and how we should structure naps to do their best work for our athletes. Overall, we just pulled out a whole lot of really cool practical strategies for parents and athletes. We think you'll love this one, and hopefully, if you're anything like me, since we recorded this episode and I've put things into practice, my sleep is definitely getting better. So check this one out. I'm sure you'll love it as much as we did.
A warm welcome to Dr. Shannon Parker. Shannon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be on the podcast to chat all things sleep.
Yeah, and Ben and I definitely need to hear it for ourselves. So we are really looking forward to this conversation. So Shannon, to begin with, for those people who might not know about Sleep Lab and, your work, can you just give us a bit of a background into who you are and how, Sleep Lab got started and how you ended up going down this field?
Yeah, definitely. So I have always had a love for sport first and foremost, through being an athlete myself back in the day, and then deciding to do that as my point of study, tertiary study. So I did an undergrad degree in sports science, and then wanted to just carry on studying pretty much. I really enjoyed the field. There was a summer research project going at the university on like a mini project around sleep in female athletes, which I ended up doing, and then it kind of just snowballed from there and opened up this whole love of the area. And yeah, was the point that I then started my PhD, and kind of stayed in that same area of athletes, particularly female athletes. And yeah, spent 3 years heavily head first in all things sleep in athletes, which was really interesting. Just became super passionate about it. And it's something within the research and obviously the different organizations and teams we worked with was not, I guess a lot of people know about it or use it within their space. So then the idea of creating a business to kind of broach that area started, and that's how Sleep Lab was born. So basically what my work involves is around sleep consultancy, whether that be working with individuals to monitor their sleep and find ways to improve it, or in the bigger space of organisations or teams to do educational workshops to try and get that message out to the bigger groups and how they can implement it. But a lot of it is on behaviour changes, so a hard one to get stuck people to commit to.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, awesome. And you're obviously a sport lover like us yourselves. Was sleep an issue for you when you were younger, like as an athlete, or was it something you thought about or didn't think about?
I probably didn't. I definitely had moments throughout adolescence where I struggled with it. But it was one of those things that was just, you kind of experienced it and didn't have any idea why or how to fix it. And even, yeah, my parents, it was just one of those things like, well, hopefully it improves at different points. But yeah, the knowledge just wasn't there to kind of figure out why.
Yeah, 100%. So I'd love to dive straight into it. Like how does better sleep help our performance? And I guess we're really coming from a youth athlete perspective, but that then goes into being an adult athlete as well. How does sleep really help performance?
It's pretty much essential. Like it underpins everything in terms of like if you break it, kind of step back in terms of just general health and well-being for everyone. It's critical for just functioning well in your daily life, your health, immune function, all of that stuff is underpinned by good sleep. And then when we look at it, I guess more specifically to athletes and youth athletes in particular, it's the one chance where we're giving our body and brain a chance to recover, and all of the good things that we want to happen during sleep, like our recovery, both mentally and physically, happens during the different stages of sleep. So deep sleep versus REM sleep, kind of different areas affect it. And all of that allows us to actually adapt to our training. So if we're not getting good sleep, then we're not giving ourselves any chance to really get those good adaptations and the hard work of the training we're doing during the day.
Yeah. I know like when you get a bad sleep, like the rest, and if you get multiple in a row, your day's really hard, right? It can be really hard just to do the simplest things.
Yeah.
What do you see in athletes when they have poor sleeps? Is it like reaction times? Is it that they can't perform certain skills and things like that? What are some of the things that you notice?
Yeah, I guess mentally, if we look at it on that side, that does impact like slower reaction time. So obviously, different sports where that's important are going to be impacted more. Ability to make decisions under pressure. So that, sports that require quick thinking, decision making, that is impacted. And then on the physical side, it's a lot of around our most of our daily growth hormone is released during deep sleep. So all of our muscle repair, rejuvenation, growth, all of that is impacted. So if we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to have good sleep or enough sleep, then physically we're not even recovering well enough. So we're not then, coming back into a peak ready for our next training session. We're always coming into it a little bit fatigued or, lower than what we can be. But yeah, things like memory consolidation, learning a new skill, all of that happens in that REM sleep.
Shannon, when we were talking to you the other day, you mentioned that there were three different types of categories that people fall into. So there was hummingbird, that was one of them. I can't remember the other two now. But
Yeah, so
yeah,
yeah,
explain a bit about that. Yeah.
yeah, three different ones we kind of can categorize it. And so that is based on our circadian rhythm, so which is our fundamental part of sleep. So everyone kind of has a different circadian rhythm based on 24-hour cycle. And people will naturally either be a night owl, so they tend to go to sleep later, but kind of need a later wake up time. Then there's early bird, where people tend to need to go to sleep earlier, but happy to wake up earlier. And then hummingbird kind of just sits in the middle with a little bit of both.
So that must really impact, athletes if they've got early morning trainings, if they're not, one of those people who is an early bird, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of, I mean, most people don't even know that you can do a questionnaire
Oh,
to kind of figure out what chronotype you are to even understand where you fit into that. But I guess in most situations, especially team sports, a lot of the, planning and scheduling is for the majority. There's not a lot of individual, not thought gone into it, but about ability to adapt schedules for each different person. So yes, sleep is a little bit tricky because each person is so different with how their chronotype is. And then also, yeah, obviously training sessions when you can fit them in for school time, if it's older athletes for around part-time work, for example, all of those kind of things, it makes it really tricky to, I guess, do it for the best time for that individual athlete.
Is that something that you can change? Like, or is that just your natural thing that this is who you are? You're a hummingbird.
It's kind of just your natural,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And is that from like you're born that way? It's something to do with genetics or your hormones or something like that? Or is it from how you've sort of been raised in those first few years? How does that come about?
Good question. I haven't probably delved into to the why or looked into the research too much as to where that comes from. It's probably a mix of everything, a little bit, but there is I guess, like a genetic deposition of where you fit in with that. But from early on, all those other like environmental factors probably impact that as well.
Yeah, interesting. And so when you're working with athletes on this, is that questionnaire to sort of find out which category they're in pretty much where you start? Because then you can kind of help them plan their life around some of those sleep hours a little bit better.
Yeah, it is one that is like there's a multitude of questionnaires that we work through at the beginning, but it is an important one. I guess it's super important, but then there's so much that we can't control. So it's good to know and it's good to work around it where we can. But then it's like on the flip side where we can't work around it, what do we do to support their sleep where we can't change scheduling or that type of thing? So important, but not, I guess you can't get hung up on it either if you can't make all the changes.
Yeah, I guess life just gets in the way sometimes, right? And all of that. And so is I know growing up, my parents always talked about the amount of hours of sleep you got.
Mm.
Is that important?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it
is
still
that sort
hasn't
of
really
one of the
changed.
keys?
Yeah, so I mean, there's still the magic number is still 8 hours. As much as life has changed over however long research has been going into sleep. The actual, yeah, all the research and evidence suggests that 8 hours is still what we need. There's about a 10% variance either side of that, like from individual side. But yeah, it is about getting enough sleep so that you allow yourself to spend time in each of those different cycles throughout the night.
So is that 8 hours straight, you're saying, that people should be getting? Or
Um, It's how you go through the night. You'll cycle through the different stages. So each sleep stage is about 90 to 120 minutes,
okay.
which consists of four different sleep stages. So N1 and N2 are kind of like our transition into sleep, our light sleep, and then into a bit of a deeper sleep. N3 is what's kind of known as what is known as deep sleep. So that's where all of our physical recovery, so 95% of our daily growth hormones released during this time. So we think about all physical repair, rejuvenation, muscle health, tissue growth, all of that happens during deep sleep. And then we go into REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement, where our brain becomes active again. And that's where all of our cognitive and mental recovery happens. So skill acquisition, memory consolidation, reaction time, decision making, all of that repair and recovery happens there. Then we kind of cycle back into that light sleep. So throughout the night, you'll have periods where you'll either wake up and remember it or you don't wake up as you transition. Well, you don't remember it, sorry, as you transition between those cycles. So yeah, we kind of aim for 8 hours of actual sleep, but it's important, or a lot of people don't realize that you will lose actual sleep time as you transition between each of those cycles. So being in bed for 8 hours isn't actually giving us the opportunity to get to 8 hours because of that loss of sleep between each of those cycles.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I have to ask this question because my wife says it to my boys all the time, and I have no idea whether it's true or not. But she says the hours before midnight are really important in terms of sleep. Is that an actual thing?
That's kind of an old saying or something that's always floated around. It's it's more there's you'll spend more time in those different stages of sleep at different points. So the research kind of tells us that the first half of the night we'll spend more time in the deep sleep period. Second half of the night, when we're going through those cycles, will be more in the REM sleep. So I guess it's not really accurate because we want to get both equal amounts of recovery between that physical and mental repair and recovery in those different stages. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit of an old wives' tale.
And just a way of getting the kids into bed earlier, maybe.
Yeah, probably.
A bit of quiet adult time.
Hey, Shannon, like screens are a hot topic, right? Like devices. I mean, what impact do they have?
Yeah, it's huge. So pretty much all screens emit something called blue light, which is really harmful for our melatonin production. So it pretty much our eyes are super sensitive to any blue light screen, and all of that has an impact on our ability to produce melatonin. So pretty much all of this constant blue light coming into our eyes suppresses or stops any melatonin production from being formed and released, and that's the hormone that we need to fall asleep. So melatonin pretty much gets secreted, or it's high in the evening so that we fall asleep, and it lowers throughout the night, and then we have our other hormone cortisol, which peaks in the morning to get us up and going. But those blue light from phones, laptops, TVs, all of that pretty much suppresses melatonin, so we're not giving ourselves the hormone that we need to initiate sleep and then get into those good sleep patterns, sleep cycles in the night.
Is there like a rule, like no screen time or before, like for an hour before bed or like,
Yeah, the optimal time would be 1 hour. Well,
okay.
any more than that, you're giving yourself even more chance to have a better sleep. But kind of the cutoff of 1 hour before bed to cut all types of screen time and have just some slow relaxation strategies happening,
What?
which is easier said than done.
Yeah, I know. I'm a shocker. So when you're talking about strategies, are you talking about, I don't know, like listening to some calming music or reading a book
Yeah.
or yeah.
Yeah, even doing some like a 5 minute yoga, muscle relaxation. Yeah, reading a book is great. Listening to, and I mean, I say listening to a podcast or slow music. Sometimes that involves technology, but obviously just
Yeah.
pushing a button quickly on and off is all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, doing a puzzle, sitting down, just talking to your partner, family, just trying to, I guess, go back to that old school way of how we, spent the evenings.
Okay.
And like, I'm curious, are you better to do that wind down, listening to quiet music, listening to a podcast, reading out of bed, and then just get into bed and your bed's just for sleeping?
Mm.
Or is it okay to do some of that stuff in bed as well?
Yeah, there's obviously elements of it that we'd want to do outside of the bedroom. We kind of try and think of the bedroom as just for sleep, like creating this environment where it's just for sleep.
Yeah.
And it's been consistent with that routine that you kind of start to set because the body thrives off routine, especially around sleep. So we want to have a consistent bedtime that we go to bed. Try not to change that within like a 30-minute window. So always going to bed at somewhat the same time. And then working backwards from what that time is to kind of do our routine that we want to do. If you're in bed, it's kind of, and you say read a book as part of your relaxation strategy, it's making sure that we have really yellow, low wattage lights, so that again, we're not kind of stimulating ourselves too much with that interrupting our melatonin. Some people will find reading a book in bed not relaxing at all. So it's one of those things you kind of play with to figure out what works for you. Whether it's reading out in the lounge in that low light, and then once you go into the bedroom, switch off, straight away into sleep. Some people kind of need a little bit of downtime while they're lying down, so reading a couple pages.
Interesting. And you mentioned light there. Like, I know you get those bulbs these days, which are incredibly, really bright white light. You reckon stay away from that, and it's the the lower wattage yellow ones that sort of help you start to drift off a little bit more.
Yeah, so as much as we talk about like blue light and screens and all of that impacting our sleep, something that's probably not really thought of as much is how much just our environment light has changed over time, and like different fads and renovations and builds kind of promote all these white bright lights. But yeah, they have an impact. So the brighter and colder, I guess, the light is, the more impact it has on that melatonin production. The softer, warmer, yellower that we can create our lights in our environment, the less impact it's going to have on our melatonin. So we kind of look at it like when you go camping, when it's like you have lots of natural light,
Yep.
it's easier to fall asleep earlier in the evenings, that kind of thing. We kind of want to bring that into our home environment as much as we can.
Awesome. I like that analogy. I want to just circle back quickly to where you're talking about 8 hours of sleep a night. Is that the same for teenage athletes? I know with my kids, I got three boys, and they were all early risers. You'd hear their feet running down the hallway into your bedroom at like 5:36 in the morning, and then suddenly they became teenagers. At a certain age, all three of them started to sleep more and more. Is that 8 hours during that time? And I guess they're starting to go through puberty, growth spurts and things like that. Is that 8 hours the same at that time, or are these teenagers starting to need more hours of sleep?
Yeah, a lot happens during that whole puberty time period. So, yeah, it's the more sleep we can give them, the better, pretty much. They do go through a period where they'll require and need more sleep before you kind of come back to that 8 hour mark. So, anything where possible, like I think any more than 10 hours is a little bit too much, but kind of allowing that between 8 to 10 hours is a good target. If they can get it, it will help with all of that growth, everything that's happening during that period.
Yeah, it's interesting because especially one of my boys was a really late developer and hadn't grown at quite an older age. Sort of started probably about 16 to go through puberty, and a lot of his mates were bigger, and that's when he started to sleep in. And me and my wife were sort of like, "Oh, he's sleeping in till 10:30, 11. Do we just leave him, or do we go and wake him up?" But you're saying sort of that 10-hour mark is probably a good time to start to wake them.
Yeah, I think you just don't want to, then kind of can impact the next night's sleep as well if you give them too much sleep, especially we talked earlier about that chronotype. We know that as adolescents go through puberty, majority, not all, but there is this natural shift in their chronotype where the majority will fall into that night owl category. So they'll all kind of have this natural shift to be going to bed later, waking up later. So we obviously want to allow them to have that, because that is just the body's just changing and they can't control that. But if we then have too late a wake up time, like that will then mean their bedtime's even later. And so you kind of end up pushing it too much the other way. So kind of sticking to a consistent wake up time that is later than normal for them, but not going beyond, I guess, that 10 hours means you're not impacting the next night's sleep.
What
Yeah,
about nap
interesting. I like that.
times? Like, not nap times, what about like my daughter? She'll often have a nap during the day. I mean, her sleep is fine, but I mean,
Naps are great.
they're great.
Yeah, they're good. We should take a note out of the Spanish.
Oh,
There's
I'm
the
so
Easters.
gutted. I reckon because I love my mum is the loveliest person in the world. I love her to bits, but she always told me don't nap during the day, and I reckon I've missed out on 30 years of naps. And I love a nap. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to make up for it in the next 30 years.
But see,
Um,
I nap all the time, and I'm thinking, is that why I don't sleep during the night? Well,
so
I love a nap.
yeah, as much as I say naps are great, we still have to be careful about, I guess, the timing of day we're doing the nap, and then how long we're napping for. So the magic number, or I guess the magic reason we want to nap is to have a quick, like energy boost give us that little bit of lift in the day. So we naturally have a dip in our circadian rhythm around in the mid-afternoon. So that's a good time to try and have a nap if you don't nap or you want to start practicing napping. But we don't want to nap any longer than around 20 to 30 minutes.
Oh God.
So it's just a quick
Hour. Okay.
pick me up.
All right. Right. Okay.
Really curious, like you said, practicing napping. Can you train yourself to nap?
Yeah, because some people will never have done it and have this idea that napping's bad. But it is one of those things, even if you're just lying down resting for 20, 30 minutes and then, that might transition to a 10-minute actual little sleep. Some people don't need it, so there's no point
Right.
giving it a go. But around competition time, especially when you've got like a week-long competition, it's not a bad thing to try and practice, but you should practice it in your normal everyday life before actually going into competition
Yep.
and trying to have a nap. But we don't want to nap or the research shows that quick nap is the target because it gives us a quick little energy boost. If we end up napping or trying to nap for longer than that and we wake up within that kind of 90 to 120 minutes, we then are quite groggy because we've either woken up in the middle of a deep sleep phase or into that REM, and then we have this thing called sleep inertia, which I'm sure if everyone's experienced a nap where you've kind of woken up and you're super groggy and it takes ages to feel like your brain's functioning and firing again, you've ended up that's this thing called sleep inertia. So it takes about 30 minutes for that to leave us, and then we can get back into what we're doing. So the longer we nap for, the risk we have that we're going to wake up in one of those in that deep sleep. So you either have to nap for a whole sleep cycle, which is 90 to 120 minutes, which most people don't have that time in a day to do. And I guess if we're doing that, it's probably saying we've got a bit of sleep debt that we're trying to catch up from the night before. So we need to address that in the first place and only use the nap as a bit of a quick energy pick-me-up.
Yeah, interesting. Hey, we love bringing you these podcasts and these episodes with all the experts that we talk to. But look, one thing we know is that about 75 to 80% of people who watch don't subscribe. If you'd take a couple of seconds and push that subscribe button, it'll really help us bring you bigger, better people in the future. And as well as that, it'll let you know as soon as a new recording is out. So if you wouldn't mind taking a couple of seconds and help us help you, that'd be awesome. I'm a huge football, basketball fan, and I know Cristiano Ronaldo, Steph Curry, LeBron James, some of the world's greatest athletes talk about napping all the time, and as part of their routine, kind of multiple naps in a day. And I guess they're talking about the 15 to 20-minute nap. Is that something you see with a lot of high-performing athletes? I guess especially these guys are probably traveling different time zones and have some crazy schedules. But is that something you see with some of the highest performing athletes?
Yeah, most of the teams that I've worked with, they have, especially when they're traveling, there is a period scheduled into their day for time to have a nap in the day that they're doing their game or competition. So yeah, it is something that at that level people use for their benefit.
So when they are having competitions and stuff, so you've said the 8 hours is the magical number, but if they are doing like a tournament, week-long tournament, do they need more than 8 hours or still just?
You want to try and keep it as consistent as possible as normal. Sleep naturally will probably be impacted around competition because of nerves, adrenaline, all of that stuff. So I think it's important to note that if people kind of probably get a lot of anxiety around having bad sleep around competition or feeling like they're not sleeping properly, what the research says is that 1 or 2 bad nights of sleep around competition doesn't actually impact your performance. It's when we're having bad sleep in our training and like consistently bad sleep where we're not allowing the good things to happen in our recovery from sleep and we can't adapt to our training, that's where it will impact our performance. But having you're nervous, you've got the pre-nerves before a competition, that you're still going to perform just as good as you would if you had 8 hours.
Nice. I know we've spoken a little bit about screens, and that's one of the biggest challenges with our youth athletes. Do you find there are some other common challenges that youth athletes and I guess their families face in terms of sleep?
A lot of it's probably around, I wouldn't say lack of knowledge, but it's probably just there's not a lot of knowledge or resources in that space at this point of time. And it's still an area that's not hugely researched. So more and more research has been done on that aged athlete, but there's still a lot of what we're basing our knowledge off is adult athletes or elite athletes. So I guess it's to start with a lot of just lack of knowledge or resources. But in that space, a lot of it is working around school times. So you're either having to do an early morning training session, or it's that evening, afternoon training session, which then means we're having a later dinner time, which then means, all of the things that normally have to happen in our evening gets pushed out. So we're then just not giving ourselves an opportunity to be in bed long enough to get those 8 hours. So yeah, it's kind of in that space, I would say school and scheduling is probably the biggest impact. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I know like my boy trained an hour away this year. And sometimes, if he was really organized, he'd have a meal that he could eat on the car ride home. But sometimes he's getting home 8 o'clock, 7:30, 8 o'clock, doesn't actually want to eat, but he knows that he needs to eat. And then you're eating at 8:30, and he probably really needs to be in bed at 9:30 because he needs to sleep. And I know that's his ideal window because he's eaten so close to it. He's just simply not ready for it. And then he's going to bed later, and it's just this vicious circle that makes it really incredibly hard for him. And we could actually see burnout, sort of happening over time. And I do put a lot of that down to late meals, and then late bedtimes. And is that
Yeah,
something you
and
see a bit of?
yeah, it's obviously your body's just working to then digest those meals. So I'm not a nutritionist and that's not my field at all.
Yeah,
And obviously post-training there's certain types of food and things we need to get into the system. But I guess it's trying to target meals that aren't really heavy to digest so that they're still getting what they need to benefit their training, but it's not a super heavy meal that's going to be hard to digest that impacts our sleep. And on the other side, outside of nutrition, it's things like we're going to have high cortisol from that training session, which is going to impact that melatonin production.
yeah,
So, really focusing on trying to put wind down routines, relaxation to try drop that cortisol down where we can to try and, relax and allow that melatonin to do what it needs. But things like we're going to have a higher core temperature just from having trained. So whether we have some cold showers or what we can do to try and relax and cool our core temperature as well, because all those little things will impact sleep. So yeah, nutrition, but yeah, as you say, when you're organized and you have a meal to have in the car on the way home, that's obviously the ideal situation. Not always going to happen or not
yeah.
easy to always happen. So it's where that can't happen, where our plan A can't happen, what do we do on our plan B to try and facilitate sleep as best we can?
Is there a timing aspect around eating before bedtime? Like, let's say 10 o'clock's your bedtime. Is there a 2 hour, 3 hour window or something like that that's best before you go to sleep?
Um, it's probably, I'm sure there probably is in the research. That's not something I've probably delved into specifically too much to answer, but I know from what I have done, earlier the better. I don't know if there's a specific magic number, but when we're having really dense, heavy meals, the earlier the better on those types of meals, so that your body's not doing all this digestion and actually working while you're trying to sleep.
Interesting. I know you mentioned temperature. That's a big one, isn't it? Because I'm sure I've read that sort of need the temperature to drop a bit for your body to realize it's sort of time to go to bed or something along those lines. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's kind of, I guess a good way to look at it is very extreme. But if people have hypothermia, for example, because they've got such a low core temperature, that is, and then it's that really risk factor of once they fall asleep, they might not wake up. That's that
Right.
extreme side, but it's a good way to think of it. So the colder our core temperature, the easier it is to kind of initiate sleep. So we do want, that's why it's so much harder in the summer months
Yeah.
to get to sleep. So trying to set the environment up where you have as cool a room as possible. Where that's not possible, trying to have cold showers, baths, as close to bedtime as possible to cool that core temperature. Because, yeah, that is like a link with initiating sleep.
Interesting. Shannon, with your research, is there any like findings that you think like coaches or athletes would be really surprised about?
There's lots how to cover it. I think um, I had a master's student a couple years ago do their project on adolescent swim athletes. So that was a really interesting one because we actually got to delve into this area of, age for athletes. And we had so I'll just pull up my notes here, a good look at around sleep in terms of, because they were swimmers, so majority of them did early morning swim sessions. So trying to look at how much sleep they actually had on the nights prior to an early morning session versus nights where their session was during the day versus just a rest day. And kind of as we'd expect, unfortunately, the nights where it was an early morning session was a lot worse. They, on average, slept 5 hours and 53 minutes
Oh,
compared to the nights where it was a day training session where they were sleeping 7 hours 40, so closer to that 8 hours, which in some ways is what we expected, but it's nice to have the research to support that. But something that was quite interesting that we did on the side for this project was getting the athletes to compare, well, estimate what they thought their sleep, how much sleep they were getting versus what we actually knew they were getting. And on average, they overestimated how much sleep they got by 54 minutes. So they were thinking they were getting 54 minutes, well, close to an hour more sleep than what they were actually getting. So that's probably something that coaches and athletes and parents should be aware of is that, and that's similar in just general research, as we normally overestimate how much sleep we think we're getting. So as much as we might plan our nights or our train or plan how much sleep we're getting, we generally overestimate it. So we're not getting what we think we're getting. And so then we're not even allowing ourselves enough opportunity to get what we we should get versus what we're actually getting.
yeah, 100%. That's really interesting. And as a takeaway from that, that perhaps we need to be recording our sleep a little bit better. I know there's rings you can wear, there's watches you can wear. I'm sure there's other things out there. Are all those things really helpful?
Yeah, it's I think a little bit of a catch-22 with some of them as well. Because there's a little bit, people can get a bit too hung up on the numbers, and then it almost has the opposite effect where it becomes this pressure point and it's really anxiety induced, and then, going to bed is actually quite stressful. So it's, yes, we should record a bit more. So we've got a bit of an idea. Different things on the market now. So we've got obviously Apple Watches, Garmin's, they all
Yep.
give us some information. Um, a lot of them actually, and I don't know how they do this because it's just so inaccurate. But they tell us like how much deep sleep we've had, how much REM sleep, and kind of give you numbers of where you've sat in those sleep cycles. There is no way to know that. The only way to know what how you're sleeping in terms of those different sleep stages is through polysomnography, where you go into a sleep lab and have the electrodes and you're actually monitored. So, in terms of that side of it, just disregard any of the information it's given you on deep sleep versus REM sleep. If you want to take anything away from it, and what's your average that it's saying you're getting per night in terms of total sleep, around 8 hours. It's obviously not going to be super accurate because it's a little piece of technology that's monitoring a whole heap of other things.
Yep.
Things like the Aura rings, they're definitely a lot more accurate. Again, kind of only focus on how long it's telling you you're slept for, maybe a little bit of like how long it took you to fall asleep, because they do provide some of that information, or just simply write down, do a little bit of a sleep diary, write down how much sleep you think you had the night before, have a little scale of, what did I think my quality was? Was it 1 out of 10, or how refreshed do I feel? And just use that as a bit of a guide to see how you're going. Because I don't think you then get so caught up on the pressure of it. It's a nice thing to reflect on and look at and see how you're going, but it's not numbers that kind of, I think, can become quite pressure on people.
Yeah, my mother-in-law, she tracks this. Well, I don't know if she still does, but she used to, or still tracks their sleep. And then so she would call my husband and be like, "Oh, I had a terrible night's sleep," and she's spouting off these things. And my husband's laughing, going, "Well, why do you need a device to let you know if you've had a terrible sleep?" With him, he just wakes up and he's like, "Oh, I've had a good sleep." But yeah, for her, it definitely did create a bit of anxiety because she was like, "Oh, my watch is telling me that I didn't have a good sleep."
Yeah, and it might have been like, because all of the only way it's measuring how you've slept is based off movement.
Yeah.
So how much you've moved in the night. So you might have just been quite restless in the night, and so then you've moved more. So it's saying that you've had more periods of being awake versus what you actually were. And if you actually just reflected and thought, oh, how do I feel today? Or, like, did it even doing a little reaction test on an iPad each morning to see what your reaction times are, something like that versus, yeah, I think it's trying to be a bit more subjective of, how do I feel versus that objective, what's the number telling me?
Interesting.
Yeah, really important information. And I think some of that technology is great, but it can also be scary and it can take you down the wrong track, right? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
use it wisely where you need, but I don't think we should get hung up on it.
Hey, look, alongside these videos, our podcast, our newsletter, and everything that we do to try and help youth sport parents and athletes, we are also designing products. This is our first one. It is hot off the press. It is our Fire Dual Fuel bottle. One of the things we know is that to become a high performer, you need to put in the time and the effort and have the intensity and the energy available to be able to continually train and play. And one of the things we also know about our teen athletes, and that I've found over decades of coaching, is that often our teens are terrible, terrible eaters. They'll turn up to training straight after school, they will come to games and they haven't eaten well. They'd have a water bottle with them, but they wouldn't have any fuel, or what they had been eating was wrong. And so what we've designed is a dual fuel bottle. They can have the hydration up the top, in the bottom, they can bring the fuel with them. This sits right beside them at training, right on the sideline at games. So when they need it at halftime, when energy is draining in the second half, they can get those fast carbs into them. We've had athletes use it in the hour before trainings and games and during games, and it's made a real difference to their focus, to their energy levels, and their output around decision making, skills, and just being able to last longer. If you want to check it out, it's at our website, www.fuelingyouth-athletes, and you'll see the Fire Dual Fuel bottle right there. We've got all the info there that you need. And it almost seems like every discussion we have on the podcast, it often just comes back to basics a lot of the time, and the basics seem to work. And we do get caught up in a lot of technology and a lot of marketing talk and things like that. That sort of, you see that in the sleep world as well.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, there is lots of different things coming out now that do cost a lot of money that really, if you just kind of brought it back to basics, pen and paper, you
Yep.
can you can kind of figure out and get some of the same information as what you'd get from all those different technology pieces.
Yeah, you can do a lot of analysis just with a watch and feelings and things like that, can't you?
Yeah, and the watches we use for research are like that's the only thing they monitor is sleep. So you know that it's very accurate because all its technology is focused on, looking at points in sleep. So it gives us a good idea of how people are actually sleeping. But we're always getting people at the same time to do their own subjective side of it and different questionnaires. So you want both that objective, subjective side when you're trying to work around sleep. But
Yeah, cool. If I want to ask a question around environment, if you, I'm sure you do this, if you were a parent of a youth athlete or the athlete themselves, how would you set up that bedroom environment? What would you have in it to create the best possible environment for sleep?
yep. It is kind of trying to create, I guess, that old school caveman idea of sleep. So we want it to be dark, obviously. So if people have a bedroom that's outside a street lamp, for example, where you can't control, that light, trying to have darker curtains or blackout curtains. I wouldn't say fully blackout curtains though, because we want to still have our natural environmental cues coming. So, when you do get some natural light coming through in the morning to tell you to wake up. So trying to have dark curtains where you eliminate artificial light, like a street
Yep.
light, trying to make it as cool as possible. Simple things like having a comfortable bed. It's amazing, or a comfortable pillow. The amount of people that, if you actually ask them, what's your bed like? They'll be like, oh, my pillow's not the best, but I just use it. It's like, well, have you thought about changing your pillow or trying something different? So actually making it comfortable. And then noise as well, trying to reduce noise where possible. If you live in a busy area or lots of traffic, trying to find ways to cut down that noise, whether it's using not been reliant on it, but some form of like white noise if you can't block out outside noise. And then light in terms of in the bedroom, so taking out charging lights, all of those things. It's amazing how much an alarm clock light or your phone charger light, you might think it's not impacting you, but your eyes are so sensitive. Any form of little light in the night can still impact that architecture of our sleep cycle.
So Shannon,
Interesting.
so you work with youth athletes, but you're also now working or with like was it the forestry industry and other corporations? Is are you finding that like as a result of technology and how busy we are, that our sleep is impacting?
Yeah, it's, I think, just across the board in society, technology, schedules, how busy people are. We just have almost, well, some of it's uncontrolled, but a lot of it is just we've created these chaotic lives almost where we're trying to fit too much in, so that we don't really, sleep becomes the least thing that people think about in the day. So we don't give ourselves the opportunity to have enough sleep, let alone it being good sleep when we are getting it. Like things travel, people, the population's just growing hugely, so it takes longer to get to work. You're stuck in cars longer, so then you have to get up earlier. So there's lots of things we can't control on that side. But yeah, technology creating busier days so that the days are so full we kind of can't fit a good evening routine in. Yeah, it's just across the board. It's everyone's sleep seems to be impacted.
Yeah, and it definitely notice it compared to when I was a kid, for sure. I got a question on mouth tape.
Oh,
Um, do you see fads like these coming in, and is breathing through your nose an important part of sleep as opposed to breathing through your mouth? And what do you think of things like mouth tape and that?
Yeah, I've definitely seen the rise in it, I guess is the word. And
Yeah,
yeah, um, I actually probably should look into the research and look into the science behind it. It's not something I've really put too much thought into, but because it's becoming so popular, it's something to start to think about. I think like I know that maybe since having my own child and you think about kids sleep a lot more, they
and your
do,
own.
yeah, yeah, or lack of it. They do a lot of the recommendation, as babies is to try and have them promote sleeping, breathing through the nose versus that mouth sleeping. I think it probably creates a chance to develop sleep apnea or things like that. So I guess there is some thought or science, like reasoning behind the mouth tape so that we're promoting breathing through the nose in our sleep as opposed to the mouth where that can have more snoring and things like that. But yeah, I probably can't answer a definite is it
Yeah,
good
fair
or is it
enough.
bad.
Well, I guess then leading on from that, what might be some red flags that a parent might notice in their kids or their teenagers in terms of maybe we need to go and see someone like yourself to improve sleep? I know we've kind of had to go down this route with my middle son, who's never been a great sleeper, but in the last few years it's probably got worse and he really struggles to fall asleep. And we went through the public health system and they've realised that he's got enormous tonsils and huge adenoids and he's booked in to have them out. And he was always a snorer, even from a young child. Are there things like this that we should be looking out for as a parent to help ensure our kids are getting the best sleep?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's certain, I think there's an understanding that around sleep, there's very genuine sleep conditions that people should be aware of, like obviously insomnia, restless leg syndrome, sleep apnea, all of those things that medically need to be addressed. And the avenue or way to go through that is kind of through GP referrals. I wish I had the resources and equipment to kind of work in that space, but a lot of it is in in sleep labs where they can look at the connection with specialists, with ear, throat, and nose specialists, because as you say,
Yep.
that is actually something that can be remedied. So it's probably kind of seen like if your child's always had sleep issues or um, they always feel like they're exhausted or fatigued, whether it's at that point of probably first point is GP where they can refer you into that medical side. Sometimes, particularly for girls, it might be low iron, all of that stuff when they're
Mm,
going through a lot of the puberty changes. So trying to address it on that side. And then coming to see the likes of me or the more behavioral side is around if if we know that all of that stuff, medical side isn't an issue, then there's probably some behavior ways we can work on sleep outside of needing the medical side. And a lot of that is around just, I guess, like that consistency around routines, what we actually, or education around how we create good environments to sleep. Um, yeah, there's that you fall into the medical side, but a lot of the time we also just don't give ourselves good sleep hygiene habits. So if we work on that, that might reduce the need for going into the medical side as well, because it's kind of like a blurred line a little bit of where you might sit.
yeah, that makes total sense. It's it is something that we don't get enough education on, isn't it? And I think of all of these sporting organisations out there working with kids and teachers, everybody. If we knew more about this stuff, it would be much easier to help educate people at a younger age so that when you are getting into some of those elite performance spaces, you've actually already got this information rather than learning about it when you're already in there.
Yeah. And yeah, like as you said earlier, the better,
Yeah,
and it's hard to change bad habits and things. So the earlier we can create good habits that pretty much promote, all of the benefits we're trying to get from training and all of that and performance, the overall better it will be. And if we step back in terms of it being education for just general health and wellness, sleep is key for, lowering different diseases,
yeah,
mortality rates. Like it's just unfortunately not promoted or put, as a preventative step in life.
100%. And like, if we look at habit creation, and habits are really, set in stone by the age of sort of 8 to 10, it really does come down to the parents to set those habits and have that education to be able to put it in place at an early age, isn't it?
Yeah, and that was one of my notes that I had, was around for parents. Probably one of the biggest things is actually themselves modeling good sleep behaviors because, you know, as early as possible, we want kids to kind of model, well, follow what that looks like. And I think if, especially around technology or phone use, for example, if you're harping on saying, get off your phone before bedtime, it's going to impact your melatonin, and they see you're not doing it, it's a hard one to kind of sell. So, yeah, all of the things around sleep you kind of hope or want people to understand and be educated on, and then model that themselves so that it becomes just a habit for children and teenagers to follow.
Yeah, I love that piece of advice. I think the biggest thing we say to parents when anyone asks within education and within sport is role model it yourselves, because the kids will be a mirror of what you do essentially.
Yeah.
Hey, look, if you're anything like me, you love watching your content, but you also love reading content. That's one of the reasons that alongside these videos, we've designed our newsletter. We call it Friday Fuel, and it comes out every Friday. Friday Fuel is a deep dive into youth sport. We really look at one aspect each week in ways that will help you as a sporting parent, but also help your athlete enjoy sport, but really maximize their potential. We love writing them, and we'd love you to be part of that community that reads them every week. The link to it's in our description from this video. All you have to do is click on it, throw your email in there, and it'll come to your inbox every week. So check that out, Friday Fuel.
We end our episodes with 4 questions, and one you already just covered, which is one do and one don't for parents wanting to support their child with sleep. So making sure that they're role modeling it. What is one do and one don't for young athletes when it comes to sleep and performance?
I think it's probably having that understanding that you kind of have to treat it, like you're training for your sport and putting that effort in because you want to get better in your sport. So sleep is a skill to work on as well. So trying to think of it the same way where we want to train and sleep just as well as if the effort you put into that just as much as you do into a training session because they link together. The more effort you put into that, the adaptations are going to come, which makes your training better, which then makes your performance better. So yeah, putting, I guess, the emphasis on it as I need to work on it like I would any of my other skills for my sport.
Nice.
I like that. I think that a lot of teenage athletes see strength and conditioning. I need to go and get stronger. I need to get faster. They see that. They often forget about the nutrition side of things, or they take the easy path. But I think sleep is probably the last thing they think about because they have so much going on as well. They want to be involved in everything. But to add that as a performance piece and that it's actually going to make all these other areas stronger is really important for them to understand. That's cool.
Yeah, and I think just, I guess, adding to that, like when we have our education workshops and kind of talk about it, we look at it like a pyramid, and sleep, nutrition, and periodization, which is around, how you stagger and work your training,
Yep.
are the foundation. And if you can't get those three things right, there's no point doing all the cool things at the top that look fun. And, like they're all the one percenters that if the bottom pillar foundation isn't being taken care of, then you're never going to get the gains at the top like you think you are. So sleep doesn't look cool, nutrition doesn't look cool compared to all the other things, but yeah, it's pretty much the foundation for anything else to platform off.
Brilliant message. Is there a one book, one tool, one resource that you've found over the years that would be really helpful for athletes or parents?
Um, the Sleep Foundation website, which is American based, is probably the best point to look at for information in terms of it covers an array of different areas, and it's been going for so long and they do research all the time. So in terms of getting, I guess, accurate and correct information, that would be the one website that is a trusted platform to go to for questions. And they've got research, they have different target things that they do in terms of their big research projects on huge population chunks of America each year. So you get in pretty good, accurate information to base off.
Love it.
Awesome. So Shannon, where can people learn more about your work and Sleep Lab?
I have a website, sleeplab.co.nz, and then you can find me on the different social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook. And then if people are interested in my research, searching me on ResearchGate has all of my research there, all under my maiden name. So Shannon O'Donnell will be what to search for. But yeah, those are where you can find most of the information.
Awesome. And look, you work with individuals, but you also work with teams and businesses and stuff as well. So it could be coming in to work with a full club, couldn't it? Or it could be working with a business in terms of helping their employees get more out of their day and things like that too, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much across anything, I'm happy to work with people.
Love it. Hey, I've got so much out of this chat in an hour, Shannon. I love it. And I think, like you said, it's a really foundational piece, not just for athletes, but for humans as well. Anybody needs good sleep. So heaps and heaps of takeaways here for ourselves, but for all our listeners, our athletes, our parents, and everybody. Just a massive thank you for coming on and sharing all that information today.
Thank you. I love sharing it. I think, yeah, it's something that just everyone will benefit from. It's the foundation for living life to your fullest, really. Everything that happens during sleep gives us the best way to have a good life. So for me, any time I can share the message and give people some takeaways, I really appreciate it. So thanks for having me.
Brilliant.
Shannon.